This evening at the Tiff Bell Lighthouse, you have an opportunity both this evening, actually, and tomorrow to witness Crispin Hellion Glover's Big Slideshow Part 2, plus It Is Fine, Everything Is Fine. And then tomorrow at 7 p.m., Crispin will perform his Big Slideshow Part 1, plus What Is It? He's going to explain all of this. He is a well-known author, musician, and an actor who is, well, you've seen him in so many different films over the years. The Doors, Back to the Future, the original Back to the Future, with a man who started his career professionally acting at the age of 13. I welcome you, and it's a pleasure to meet you.
Well, nice to meet you as well. I appreciate you having me.
I could spend 10 minutes just going over your film credits before I even got into your recording and your books. You've published, what, 15, 20 books?
Well, I've made about 20 of them, and I've published 4 of them. I need to be publishing more of them. There's about 16 altogether in the 2 different shows, and I need to publish all of those. But I've had my money tied up in the films that I'm presenting this evening and tomorrow evening at TIFF. So now I'm on year 7 of touring with these films and shows, and I finally basically just recouped for my investment. I financed these films myself, and I basically just recouped at the beginning of last year. So it's a long time of touring and performing and showing the films to get to the point of recoupment. But it's worth it for me. I'm very passionate about what the content is, because I feel like in the corporately funded and distributed film systems right now, there's really not a lot that is causing questions or causing people to question things. I think that's been severely limited really in the last 30 years. And it gets to me, and I feel passionate about getting out and having films out there that cause questions. And that's another part of why I tour with them, is that people have a lot of questions after the film. So first I present the 1-hour dramatic narration of 8 different books, which are, I have a couple here with me they're heavily illustrated books.
Did you do the illustration as well?
Yeah, they're old illustrations taken from books from the 1800s that have been reworked. Some of them are illustrations that I've made myself. It depends on the book and the style of them. But these images are projected behind me as I narrate the books, or dramatically narrate them for about an hour, and then after the narrative performance, I present the film, and then after that I have a Q&A. And the Q&A, gosh, I try to keep it down at about 45 minutes, but often it goes to an hour and a half, and then I have a book signing after that. So it's a long evening. It's a 4-hour plus show.
Wow!
But it's worth it. Like I say, I'm passionate to do it, and and it's made it, now that I've basically recouped, I really have recouped more on the live performance and on the book sales rather than by the box office sales. But that doesn't matter. All that mattered to me was that I was able to recoup, so that I was able to justify continuing to make my own films, and I've started building sets for my next production now.
So this is clearly, this is not what you'd call a mainstream cinema.
Yeah, it's independently financed, and as specifically a reaction. The first film, the one I'll be showing tomorrow night, I show them backwards, but the first film is called What Is It? Most of the actors in the film have Down syndrome, but the film is not about Down syndrome at all. What it really is similar to what I've been saying. It's my psychological reaction to the corporate constraints that have happened in the last 30 years in filmmaking, wherein anything that can possibly make an audience member uncomfortable is necessarily excised, or that film will not be corporately funded or distributed. And I think that's a very damaging thing to the culture, because it's those moments when an audience member sits back at their chair, looks up at the screen, and thinks to themselves, is this right what I'm watching? Is this wrong what I'm watching? Should I be here? Should the filmmaker have done this? what is it? And that's the title of the first film. What is it that's taboo in the culture, and what does it mean when the taboo has been ubiquitously excised? And again, I think it's damaging because really when people are having questions, they're having real education, they're having learning from within. And when that's excised, it really becomes, well, it becomes the opposite of education. And what is the opposite of education? It's propaganda. And I feel like essentially we're living in a very deep propagandistic element in our corporately funded and distributed film, and that isn't good. The second film is a different kind of film in that it was written by a man, and that's the one I'll be showing tonight. It's part two of the trilogy. I put Stephen C. Stewart into part one. I'd read his screenplay many years before. Steve was born with a very severe case of cerebral palsy, and he'd been, when he was in his early 20s, he'd been locked into a nursing home because his mother died, and he was put there against his will. He did not want to be there, but he was very difficult to understand, and the people that were taking care of him in this nursing home would derisively call him an MR, a mental retard, which is not a nice thing to say to anybody, but Steve was of normal intelligence, and the emotional turmoil he must have gone through for the decade he was in that nursing home, I can't even begin to imagine. But he did get out, and when he got out, he wrote this screenplay, and it's kind of a fantastical screenplay that was written in the style of a 1970s TV murder mystery movie of the week, wherein he's the bad guy. And he does many very terrible things in this movie, but it's a fascinating point of view because it is a fantasy, it's not a documentary, but it is also a documentation of this particular person living out this very particular fantasy that he had written for himself to live out. It was very important to Steve that he played a bad guy. If you think about it, if you see a corporate...
Why? Because he was the one that was tormented for the bulk of his life, now wanted to take the opposite role?
I don't know about that. There are certain things that I have questions. One could argue that, it was 10 years and not necessarily the bulk of his life, and yet at the same time that's an important
time. Big important part of his life.
Yeah, and I would, there is a certain amount of rage in the film that you can feel, and yet there's a real beauty to it. It's a very fantastical, romantic almost point of view, so it has a duality to it, but you can definitely feel a rage within the film, and one might think that it did have something to do with being locked against as well.
You've been touring with this production, you said, for 7 years now.
But starting with What Is It in 2005, and then starting in 2007 with Everything Is Fine. So together, yeah.
Yeah, and so what has the audience reaction been?
It's been positive. I mean, the films straddle the area where, particularly the first film, where there are people that have questions. People can become discomforted by things in both of the films. But part of why I tour with it and why I have the question and answer sessions is because that was part of what the movies were to do, to cause questions. And they're adult films in the best terms. No one under 18 is allowed. These are adult conversations that I feel like should be happening in our culture that aren't happening. And sometimes people get upset, but for the most part, people are getting something out of the whole experience. And I've had very good reactions from a very broad spectrum of people that come. Families come, people that are interested in unusual art, people that are just have seen me in things like Back to the Future. But I get a very broad spectrum, and I've had a really positive experience with it.
And how are they shot? How do you shoot these?
Both of the films were shot on standard 16mm film and then put into a digital intermediate, and there were 35mm projections, 35mm films, and the way they look, I'm really proud of. They're beautiful.
You were going for that look, though, of old film.
Yeah, they feel, both of them tend toward, particularly the second film, Steve's film, feels like the 70s, but a kind of a very beautiful color. The color is very important in both of the films. It's something that people often comment on, and both in the art direction and in the fact that I usually when you see a film, it's a second generation removed from the original negative, and I print straight from the negative because I don't have a huge print run, which most corporate films do.
Crispin Glover, my guest in studio. We'll come back in a moment.